Part 5. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzwan Xianxia. Chapter 41. Zuyun felt as if his head exploded with a bang. Ergu is really fine. Over the past year, whenever Zuyun thought of Ergu, his honest smile would appear in his heart. All this time, Ergu had no clue. How could he not be worried? Moreover, remembering what Ergu said at that time to take good care of his sister, the more Zuyun thought about it, the more it felt like Ergu was giving his last words. Now, after hearing Mengwei say that Ergu had reached the 5th level of qi refining, he didn't know how to express his feelings. How can we find him? Zuyun wished he could spread his wings and find Ergu now. Brother, there are two ways, Mengwei said. I am mentally connected to my natal magic weapon, but after all, your classmate has been walking for half a month. The farther the distance, the more spiritual energy I need to consume. But now, my spiritual power is insufficient, and my body is suppressed. At best, I can only return to the realm of foundation building. I can't guarantee that I will be able to sense the magic weapon in a short time. What about the second option? The second way is, to go to Yaloo sect. As long as we speed up our pace, we can definitely catch up with him. But just what? Zuyun asked impatiently. I don't have long to live. I have traveled thousands of miles to Yezhu, and there are many roads to take. If I don't meet one road and turn back, I may die on the road. Hearing this, Zuyun fell silent. Is it dangerous to go to Yezhu? Zuyun raised his head and asked. Dangerous? A smile appeared on Mengwei's face and he asked, Look, I'm not in Yezhu. Is it safe? Zuyun choked and understood the meaning of Mengwei's words. The danger is not in the road, but in the human heart. How can I save you? Zuyun looked at Shizu and already had a decision in his heart. You are not suppressed by this formation, just pull me out of it. So simple. Zuyun felt a little unbelievable why Ergu didn't save him at that time. But then I thought, if I hadn't gone to find Ergu, I probably wouldn't have dared to save her. Suddenly, he felt relieved. Zuyun stepped forward. At this time, Mengwei could only move his neck, and his hands were trapped between the stone pillars. He only had Ergu in his heart, and without thinking too much, he directly held Mengwei's delicate little hand. Weak and boneless. The word immediately appeared in Zuyun's mind, and he didn't see the flash of shyness on Mengwei's face. Mengwei grew up in Yaloo sect as long as he could remember. And the Yaloo sect is all female cultivators. How have they ever touched hands with men? Even though she is over 500 years old, she has been trapped here for more than 500 years. I didn't expect, the man who met me for the first time turned out to be a young boy. Mengwei said in his heart, with a lot of thoughts in his mind, until a sudden feeling of relief came over his body, and then he realized that he had been pulled out of the stone pillar by Zuyun without knowing it. Boom! The stone pillars were already crumbling, and Mengwei was an integral part of the stone pillars. After she left, the stone pillars began to collapse. Let's go. When Mengwei saw Zuyun looking back, he urged in a sweet voice. Oh. Zuyun pulled Mengwei, but didn't feel anything. He was only 11 years old at this time, so how could he know anything about men and women? Even if he said something about playing with your sister in order to excite Ergu, he actually meant to scare her. Hearing Mengwei's urging, he suddenly exerted force on his feet and rushed into the mist. At this time, the fog was also affected and kept flowing. Fortunately, Zuyun found a direction. The fog only blocked the spiritual consciousness and there was no danger, so he went straight. Huh! Suddenly, Zuyun stepped on a hard object under his feet. He looked down and realized that it was Wan Laojian's magic sword that he had fought with before. The magic sword has lost its light at this time, apparently because Wan Laojian is dead and the magic sword has become ownerless. He picked it up without hesitation. This is definitely a middle-grade magic sword. I happen to have run out of swords, and those low-grade magic swords that were refined could only be used once before breaking. Why are you picking up this trash? Mengwei asked strangely. Trash? This is a middle-grade magical sword. Zuyun replied and pulled Mengwei away quickly. Mengwei was about to laugh at Zuyun for his lack of knowledge, but then he thought about it. For him at the stage of forming a pill, this was indeed rubbish. But Zuyun is still in the qi refining period. They led Mengwei all the way to the cave, and the stone pillars behind them had completely collapsed. Zuyun then remembered that he could not bring Mengwei to the sect. Let's wait here for a moment, no one usually comes to Magian Cliff. He didn't know that his fight with Wan Laojin had attracted the sect's attention. Are you taking me away? Mengwei blinked and asked. Leave. Zuyun showed an annoyed look on his face and said, I can't go out now, and you won't take me away. Mengwei interrupted Zuyun. I can't leave. If you want to leave, you should go find Ergu first. Zuyun's decision at that time was that Mengwei should recover her spiritual power here first and let her find Ergu first. It's better to act alone than for him to be a burden. Moreover, he has no means of protecting himself. Even if I win Wan Laojin today, luck still plays a huge part. And Mengwei also wants to return to Yaluo sect. I can't leave without you. Mengwei said quietly. Are you saying that you have no spiritual power? Zuyun scratched his head and said, I don't know how injured you are, and I don't know how you can recover after burning your longevity. Tell me, what do you need? I'll see if I can help you prepare something. You. Mengwei snorted and smiled. You are a kid in the qi refining stage, what good things can you come up with? I need the UN return pill and the spirit gathering pill. Do you have it? Zuyun shook his head. This pill was beyond his knowledge. Yes, ordinary elixirs have no effect on me. I am in the elixir formation stage. Even though I don't have the power to bind a chicken now, my realm is still there. Otherwise, you'd better kill me, then burn it, and take it with you. My ashes are from the Yunyuluo section. Mengwei sighed. No, if I kill you I won't be able to find Ergu. Zuyun said anxiously. But Mengwei put away his face again, his expression changing at every turn. The one who was still smiling just now pouted again. I have no spiritual power, I am no different from immortal. And my lifespan is about to end, and I may die on the way at any time. Then I will increase your longevity. Is there such a pill? Zuyun racked his brains and suddenly remembered the medicinal garden in his Diwu glass mirror. Many of the elixirs among them have become essences. Maybe, you can make a pill that increases longevity. He remembered reading in a book that the elixir for increasing longevity had no requirements for realm. The difficulty lies in the elixir being hard to find. Exactly. Mengwei said disdainfully, if this elixir is so easy to refine, how can there be so many powerful people in the world who are closed to death, so closed that they really close themselves to death? Just tell me if you have. Zuyun found it a bit difficult to communicate with Mengwei. Isn't it okay for you to answer whatever I ask? There is definitely some, but can you find the elixir you need? Mengwei glanced at Zuyun and saw that there were all kinds of elixirs to increase longevity. Depends on the type and year of the elixir. Just extract the unique spiritual power and rhyme into a pill. As for the alchemy technique and the temperature, there are no requirements at all. I know that there are 3 elixirs that can increase longevity: blood ginseng, snow lotus, and immortality grass. The older the time, the more longevity will be increased. These 3. Zuyun was stunned because there was a blood red ginseng in the medicine garden. But he never paid attention to it because he was new to alchemy and thought he wouldn't be able to use such a good elixir. In addition, the blood ginseng is also one of the spirits. Every time I want to get close, the blood ginseng burrows into the soil with a swish. No matter how hard I look for it, I can't find it. Yes, just these 3 types. Menghui was furious. He didn't know what the outside world was like now. But Yunzhou has long since become a barren land, let alone whether these elixirs can grow. As long as there is a medicinal seedling, it has probably been snatched away long ago. You have a low level and short knowledge. You don't know that these elixirs will cause others to rob them even in the Yao realm. One thing she remembers is that when she was still young, Yao Sek sent out 3 Danja people to grab an immortality grass seedling. As a result, 2 people died and 1 was seriously injured, and finally he was able to escape from the crowd and return to Yao sect. I don't know if that seedling is still there now. Zhu Yun thought for a while, stood up and said, "You recuperate here first, and I will come see you tomorrow." With that said, she took out all the talismans in her arms and handed them to Menghui, saying, "These are for your self-defense. I'll go back and think of a solution." Menghui took it and asked curiously, "Are these elementary talismans the ones you smashed to death, Wan Laojian?" "Well, please be careful and don't take action unless absolutely necessary." "I know, I'm not a child." Menghui disliked Zhu Yun's teaching tone to her. Zhu Yun thought to himself, "I know you are not a child," and said, "So what if you are over 500 years old? You just kept calling me little brother. Little brat, get out of here." Menghui raised a talisman fiercely. "I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills." Author, Banzhuan Xianxia. Chapter 42. Zhu Yun quickly used the body-moving technique to dodge out of the cave. He pouted and said in his heart, crying and laughing, fierce and noisy, changing his face at any time, "No wonder he is the young master of the demon path. When I saved her, she called me little brother. Now she is driving me away and calling herself this palace. It's really troublesome." Zhu Yun didn't meet anyone all the way from the Magian Cliff. Instead, he saw many houses collapsed on the road, as if they had encountered a natural disaster. Thinking carefully, could it be caused by the collapse of the stone pillar just now? Thinking of this, he hurried towards the valley. "Xiaozhu, Xiaozhu." As soon as he arrived at the entrance of the valley, he heard the call of the big dog. "Big dog, what's wrong?" Zhu Yun felt much better when he knew that Ergu was still alive, so he asked with a smile. "Are you okay? The whole sect was shaken just now. I was afraid that something might happen to you, so I came to see you." "I'm fine." Zhu Yun did see the worry in De Go's eyes, and he couldn't help but feel grateful, saying, "Go practice quickly." He has become a practice maniac, and Zhu Yun naturally asked him to go back quickly because he could spare precious time to find him. "Well, come to me if you have anything." De Go patted Zhu Yun's shoulder and said, "When I reach the 6th level of Qi refining, I will be qualified to go to Wanjian Mountain." Zhu Yun didn't respond, and suddenly an idea popped up in his mind. Wanjian Mountain is also in Yejing. If De Go also went, maybe he could meet Ergo. Yes, that's right. Thinking of this, Zhu Yun immediately wanted to call De Go. But when the words came to his lips, he swallowed them back. De Go is in the critical period of practice. If he tells him now, it may affect his practice. It's not too late to talk to him when he leaves. Is Wanji Unshan good or bad? I even saved the palace master of the demonic path, so it's up to people to decide whether he is good or bad. Big dog, come on. Zhu Yun stopped Big Dog and raised his fist. "Come on, you two." Big Dog turned around and smiled. Zhu Yun passed through the mist and returned to the valley. He found that the valley was not affected at all. He felt the smell of fireworks coming from the alchemy room, so he hurried over. "Master, master!" Zhu Yun shouted while running. "Little kid, what's wrong? Did you pee because of the collapse?" Sun Suanhua walked out of the alchemy room and asked. Zuyun didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If he told Sun Suanhua that the collapse was caused by him, he would probably pee his pants. You know, he killed Wan Laojin. Luckily, no one knew, otherwise. At this time, Zuyun couldn't help but feel scared. No way, are you really scared? Sun Suanhua looked at Zuyun with disdain and said, you are my disciple after all. Look, there was such a big noise just now, but I continued to refine the elixir and was not affected at all. Zuyun curled his lips and whispered, you are afraid of the explosion of the furnace. Sun Suanhua blew his beard and glared, do you really have to expose the old face of master? Hurry up, you come to refine the elixir in the afternoon, and the master will go to practice sword fighting. Recently, Zuyun also began to help Sun Suanhua with work. Refining tools and elixirs and drawing talismans are equally declining. Sun Suanhua secretly refined his own magic sword. Oh, Zuyun responded, and suddenly said, by the way, master, do you know how to refine elixirs to increase lifespan? What? Is your father going to die? He knew that Zuyun wanted to visit relatives recently. Zuyun was thinking that there was no reason to explain, so he quickly followed his words and said, master, how can you talk like that? My father lives a long life. Then why are you asking about the longevity pill? You are only 11 years old, and you can live for more than 100 years in the qi refining stage. He didn't want Zuyun to waste time on this. After all, he had never seen the spiritual medicine for the longevity pill. Where to find it? I'm thinking of refining one when I have the chance, what if my father needs it? Zuyun touched the back of his head and said embarrassedly. He, you are better at talking than me. Sun Suanhua did not doubt what Zuyun was thinking, and said, the method of refining the longevity pill, you can just refine any pill. It's nothing more than 3 steps of purification, melting, and pill formation. But the spiritual medicine is not so easy to find. You may encounter it when you reach the foundation building stage and step on dog shit for a month. A cultivator stepping on dog shit? That is something that will never happen. Zuyun knew that Sun Suanhua was mocking him, describing that it is possible to have good luck against heaven. So it's so hard to find. Zuyun showed disappointment on his face, but he was excited in his heart. If Menghui's lifespan is extended, it will be more likely to find Ergu. Hurry up and work. Do you still want to learn the Firebird Talisman? Sun Suanhua urged. Yes, yes. Zuyun hurried into the alchemy room. The alchemy was made with a huge copper furnace, which belonged to the spirit sword sect. The spiritual wood was burned under the copper furnace. The spiritual wood was provided by the sect, but there was no restriction. Only the materials for refining the elixir were tightly controlled by the sect. Only ordinary fasting pills, spirit-supporting pills, and other things that were not very useful would not be taken care of. It's like the primary talisman paper, as much as you want. This is also the reason why Sun Suanhua is so poor. Sun Suanhua said that he had a chance to get a human fire, and his efficiency in alchemy would be higher, but he was not good at fighting. Fortunately, he was able to escape with his life thanks to his amazing physical skills and the use of talismans. Zuyun got to know human fire, what it was, and also knew that above human fire, there was earth fire and sky fire. These are all spiritual flames, which are of great help to monks and have many functions. However, these are treasured things that only those with great opportunity can obtain. The Lingjian sect only refines some ordinary elixirs such as Heki pills, and using spirit wood is enough. Zuyun glanced at the list on the side of the copper stove. The task of refining alchemy seemed a bit heavy this time. He needed a lot of Heki pill and Huanglong pill. Humph, I just want to be lazy, but it's okay, wait until the master isn't paying attention, and secretly practice the longevity pill. Zuyun knew how to make alchemy, and his mood naturally improved a lot. While refining the Iki pill, he was thinking about how to catch the blood ginseng. Over in the refining room, there was another clanging sound, and with the thought in mind, he ducked into the Daewoo glazed mirror. He knew that Sun Suanhua would never disturb him when he was refining alchemy, but he needed to hurry up. After leaving the cave, he immediately ran towards the medicine garden, and some of the elixirs shrank into the soil. But that flash of red was particularly eye-catching, and Zuyun saw it immediately. The medicine garden is only so big, let me see where else you can run. I had never thought of arresting him before, but Zuyun would not be used to the blood ginseng at this time. He thought for a moment and took out the middle-grade magic sword from his storage bag. There was a feeling of coldness where he started. He picked up his sword and walked into the medicine garden, and started digging at the hole where the blood ginseng had slipped away. But before long, he was out of breath from exhaustion. What kind of mud is this? Why is it so sticky? Zuyun threw the sword away and sat on the ground, breathing heavily. After digging for a while, not much soil was found, let alone blood ginseng. While he was talking, he saw that the soil was slowly filling back into the hole. He immediately became anxious. I spent a lot of effort digging it out. If you fill it back in now, wouldn't all my efforts be in vain? Thinking of this, he directly inserted the sword into the hole without saying a word. I didn't expect that it would be difficult to dig out the soil, but this sword penetrated it to the bottom. At the same time, he felt a shaking from the sword, as if it had been struck by something. Hey, could it be that a blood ginseng was inserted? Zuyun felt happy and quickly pulled the sword back. I saw a little finger-like blood ginseng beard stuck on the tip of the sword. There is even a red liquid oozing from the fracture, which is no different from human blood, and it also exudes a pure spiritual power. How about, take this whisk and practice it? Zuyun thought, if he directly takes a whole blood ginseng to refine it, if he doesn't have enough heat, he will be gone if the refinement breaks down. And if this little bit of practice breaks down, I don't feel bad at all. Whatever he wanted to do, Zuyun threw the entire magic sword into the storage bag and returned to the alchemy room in a flash. At this time, the outside world has just had a cup of tea. The spirit wood under the copper furnace is burning brightly. This furnace of elixirs will still take some time. He pricked up his ears and listened. Sun Suanhua was still wielding his sword, and he felt relieved. It was the first time for him to enter the Daewoo glass mirror with Sun Suanhua so close, and he felt like a thief. So exciting. After he calmed down, a batch of Heki pills was finished. Zuyun waved his hand, and the furnace lid opened, and more than 10 Heki pills flew out from it and fell directly into his hands. Picking up an empty porcelain bottle next to him, Zuyun stuffed all the Heki pills into it. Then he took out the magic sword from the storage bag, pulled out the blood ginseng beard from the tip of the sword, and threw it into the copper furnace. The Bigu pill is to extract the essence from the 5 grains, it seems to have the same meaning as the Xiaoyuan pill, why not make it according to the Bigu pill method? Zuyun first practiced with Bigu pill, which was the fastest pill he could refine. Without thinking, he picked up a large pile of spiritual wood from the side and threw it all under the copper furnace. In order to increase the intensity of the fire, he also condensed the fire spirit power in his body and added a little more fire. In the refining room, Sun Suanhua noticed this spiritual power and thought to himself, this kid is using his spiritual power to increase the heat again, there's really nothing I can do about him, forget it, the better the elixir he makes, the better I can do it. Escape early, this sword will probably be ready in a few days. Shaking his head, Sun Suanhua continued to bang his sword, and the clanging sound was endless. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 43. Under the copper furnace, the spiritual trees were ablaze under the blessing of Zhu Yun's fire spiritual power. Originally, he didn't hold on to Zhu Yun, who could succeed with just one practice, but his thoughts were all on the outside. If he heard the beating sound from Sun Suan, who was side become quieter, he would need to stop refining the blood ginseng whiskers immediately. But he didn't know that at this time, in the Lingjian sect master hall, more than 10 foundation establishment stagers headed by Lin Zhenyang began to move. Sect master, there is no movement at the bottom of confused sword cliff. Why don't we go take a look now? Elder Mu's eyes glowed with coldness. Beside, several other elders also responded in unison. Such a big movement suddenly disappeared, which made them even more unbearable. Lin Zhenyang pondered for a moment and said, Wan Laojin hasn't come back yet. If we meet him, I'll tell him later. I'm afraid something might happen to him and I'll go and have a look. Compared to these elders, Lin Zhenyang wanted to go there even more. In the nearly 100 years since he became the master of the Spirit Sword sect, he only knew that he could not go to the bottom of the Misty Sword Cliff, let alone see such movement in the Misty Sword Cliff. All he was thinking about at this time was the birth of a strange treasure. Yes, sect master. All the elders were overjoyed and agreed one after another. Then they followed Lin Zhenyang and stood up with their swords, flying towards the sword enchanting cliff together. At the same time, Yejing Center is an independent giant peak in Yezhu. This peak is like a sword that cuts through the sky and goes deep into the clouds. The tip of the sword penetrates directly into the earth's veins, and the hilt is like a platform, where tens of thousands of people can stand. Near the center, there are several magnificent buildings. This is where the elders and sect masters of Wanjian Mountain live. Report to Elder Jian San, Wan Laojin, who is stationed at the Lost Sword formation of Yunzhou Lingjian sect. The soul card suddenly cracked, and he is afraid of something unexpected. A disciple in the foundation building stage rushed up to the platform from the foot of the mountain with his sword, and shouted loudly after landing. Wan Laojin, an old but rich voice came from a room, full of doubts, but then impatiently said, How can this disciple, this elder, remember his name? If he dies, he will die. Let's see. Send any disciples who have been eliminated recently. Elder Jianzan, this. The disciple was slightly startled, and just as he was about to say something, there seemed to be countless sharp swords locked on him in the clouds. Yes, Elder Jianzan. He quickly changed his words and responded. The pressure suddenly disappeared, but his back was already dripping with cold sweat. The voice of Elder Jianzan came again, You go and choose someone first. I will send the 18th elder to send them over. We will set off in half an hour. Yes, Elder Jianzan. The disciple did not dare to linger any longer, so he stood up and jumped directly from the platform. After reciting a few sword tactics, the flying sword appeared at the bottom of his feet, supporting him to fly towards the bottom of the mountain. Jianzan, I didn't even feel hot when I got back. Why did you send me to that ungrateful place in Yunzhou? On the platform, someone said dissatisfiedly. 18. Do you remember who was suppressed by me Jian Cliff in Yunzhou? I'm not interested, how can I remember it? Mengwei. Mengwei? The one named Meng is the young palace master of Yaluo sect. That's right, so you send people over and take a look to see how many breaths the little witch has left. If her spiritual power has completely faded, then ask them where the sacred objects of Yaluo sect are. This is a great achievement. Jianzan, I'm going right away. Hearing the merit, Jian Shiba reached out and made a move, and a flying sword came through the air. Don't be anxious, Jian San said anxiously, that witch has a blood-burning magic that can increase her power in a short period of time. You must not get in her way. After more than 500 years of suppression, what if she can return to the strength of the pill-forming stage? Xianxia looked disdainful, stepped on the flying sword and dived straight down. In the alchemy room, Zuyun put away his fire spiritual power. Above the copper stove, there was a faint red mist. According to his experience in refining the bigu pill, the pill should be ready. The bigu pill is made from whole grains and produces a light yellow smoke, while the blood ginseng pill is completely red, and even the juice seeping out of it looks like blood. Come out. Zuyun heard the knocking sound in his ears without any change, so he stretched out his hand. The lid of the copper furnace opened slightly, and a dark red pill flew out from it and fell into Zuyun's hands. Is this the Xiao Yuan Dan? He glanced at it, put it into an empty porcelain bottle, and threw it into his storage bag. We will know if we try it on that 500-year-old girl tomorrow. If possible, I can bring over some more blood ginseng. Zuyun was overjoyed and looked at the rest of the materials. Today's task was not easy, so he had better finish it first. After working until dusk, Zuyun had refined all the ingredients into elixirs. Heki pill and Huanglong pill are just ordinary pills. Once mastered, they are extremely simple. Zuyun can even do two things at once, just pay attention to the heat and don't make mistakes. However, he also deeply felt Sun Suanhua's helplessness. The Lingjian sect dug out these elixirs very hard. The refined elixirs are not too many and not too little. No wonder Sun Suanhua is so poor. After placing these elixirs on the medicine shelf one by one, Zuyun stopped when he heard the sounds in the weapon refining room. After a few breaths, Sun Suanhua pushed open the door and entered. Master, how did you beat yourself up like this? Seeing Sun Suanhua's sluggish expression and his spiritual energy slightly confused, Zuyun started to tease. Young kid, you know how to make sarcastic remarks. Sun Suanhua looked at the table and said, I heard that you want to go home to visit relatives. Master, how do you know? Zuyun was shocked. I know a lot of things as a teacher. When do you plan to leave? Sun Suanhua asked. Zuyun had been with him for more than a year. He knew his temper and didn't care. He said, we haven't decided when to go yet. Originally, he wanted to go there quickly and take a look, maybe the two dogs were hiding in Barren Rock Mountain. But now that I know Urgu has gone to Yao Realm, and there is a little witch beside him, I can't decide at once. If you want to go, go quickly, Sun Suanhua said, it just so happens that I will be in seclusion for a few days. I will go to deliver the elixirs later and ask if I still need low-grade magic swords and talismans. Prepare them for them early, so they don't have to come here. Disturb. Master, didn't you say that cultivation is useless? Why should you be in seclusion? Zuyunkai said that he had never seen Sun Suanhua practicing. At most, the spiritual power is depleted, and the spiritual power can be replenished by practicing qi for a while. You know nothing, Sun Suanhua said angrily. How can I reach the third level of foundation building if I don't practice as a teacher? If you want to leave, hurry up. It's best to go back within 3 days. So urgent. Zuyun scratched his head when he saw Sun Suanhua's expression, and Zhu Rong's reluctant expression at that time appeared in his mind. If you want to take a look, you can go early and come back early. Master, I will set off within 3 days. Sun Suanhua nodded and said, well, be careful on the road and bring more talismans for self-defense. As he spoke, he seemed to hesitate for a moment, then took out a grey magic sword from his storage bag and said, this sword was refined by the master before he entered the spirit sword section. It is a low-grade and high-grade sword. If you encounter it's dangerous, I allow you to use your sword to defend yourself. But remember, you must learn to hide your weakness when you go out. Thank you, master. Zuyun was overjoyed and took the long sword. He originally planned to cut corners when refining the weapon and give himself some ordinary low-grade magic swords, but he didn't expect that Sun Suanhua gave him one. Although he had a middle-grade magic sword from Wan Laojin on him at this time, Zuyun did not dare to use that sword casually. Sun Suanhua is right, when you go out for a walk, you must learn to hide your clumsiness. Whether it's your own treasure or your own strength. Zhang Tianyuan, wasn't it caused by a pot of wine? That's right. I wonder if I can meet those casual cultivators in the market town at the foot of the mountain. Little kid, don't think about avenging Zhang Tianyuan. Sun Suanhua seemed to have understood what Zuyun was thinking, and said, how long have you been practicing? Just visit relatives when you visit them, and don't cause trouble. The Firebird talisman of my teacher, don't you want to learn? Master, I want to learn. Zuyun said quickly. Well, tomorrow, I will teach you how to draw the Firebird talisman. You better prepare yourself. After saying that, Sun Suanhua flicked his sleeves and a row of elixirs that had just been refined on the medicine shelf went into his sleeves. After sending Sun Suanhua away from the fog formation, Zuyun's eyes rolled. If Master knew that I had just killed Wan Laojin, I'm afraid he wouldn't think so. How about giving it a try? Thinking of this, Zuyun began to think about how to deal with the three murderers if he really encountered them. But now, I must draw some elementary talismans first. Zuyun ran back to his house and drew the talisman. Until Sun Suanhua came back, he frowned and said to him, little boy, things have gone bad. Wan Laojin is dead. Zuyun secretly thought, I am the one who made all the fuss and killed that old pervert. However, he pretended to be surprised on his face. Master, why did you die when you were fine? Isn't Elder Wan the 8th level of foundation building? You know nothing, Sun Suanhua cursed, walking back and forth in the room like an ant on a hot pot. Wan Laojin is a disciple of Wan Jianshan, and they are all from the Soul Pavilion. Wan Jianshan must still be here. I will send someone over, but if someone who knows me comes over, I will be in trouble. Zuyun was really surprised now. Was Sun Suanhua afraid of being recognized by the people in Wanjian Mountain? Master, are you, from Yeazhu? I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzwan Xianxia. Chapter 44. Is it weird? My teacher never said that he was from the Spirit Sword sect. Sun Suanhua admitted it openly, which made Zuyun a little confused. Master, why do you? He didn't dare to say anything later, because at that time both Dago and Ergo said that Sun Suanhua was working as a coolie. Even the elders didn't want to see Sun Suanhua. Why are you refining elixirs, refining weapons, and drawing talismans for them here? Sun Suanhua knew what Zuyun was thinking and said, if I can't defeat them as a teacher, what can I do? Zuyun choked. If this were not the case, how could their spirit sword sect be so stingy? Upon hearing this rhetorical question, Zuyun immediately figured out that the Lingjian sect controlled some materials that were helpful for cultivation. Master, are they afraid that you will run away? Zuyun asked. Nonsense, how can I stay in this miserable place in Yunzhou? Sun Suanhua was not polite, sat down on Zuyun's bed, and said, at that time, I was chased by people from Wanjian Mountain, so I escaped here. Who would have thought that I would be trapped here for nearly 100 years? But that's fine, no one from Wanjian Mountain would have thought that I was here. Wan Laojin is just an outer disciple of Wanjian Mountain, and he doesn't recognize me either. Come out. But now that Wan Laojin is dead, they will definitely send someone here. What if they know me? Sun Suanhua's face was anxious. Originally, his plan had been put on the agenda, and Jin Chan would be able to escape within half a year at most. Who would have thought that Wan Laojin would die suddenly? Master, I have a question at this moment. Zuyun suddenly thought of something and said, you have given all your skills to me, do you want your disciple to stay here and do hard work for you? Hearing this, Sun Suanhua's expression changed, and he said with a smile, don't speak so harshly, as a teacher, I don't have any secrets. So, little kid, how about you stay here and work, and you can sneak away as a teacher. Zuyun pondered for a moment and said, Master, do you want to go back to Yezhu? Nonsense, I've had enough of staying in this shabby place like Yunzhou as a teacher. Yezhu is more than 10 times bigger than Yunzhou. Any small sect you can find as a teacher will be hundreds of times better than the Lingjian sect. A look of pride flashed across Sun Suanhua's face, and he continued, I have wasted more than 100 years here, doing elementary things every day, and my Tao skills have not improved, and I will not be reconciled to death. Zuyun rolled his eyes and asked tentatively, Master, aren't you afraid that your disciple will inform you now? Good boy, Sun Suanhua said anxiously, don't say that. You and I are always master and disciple, and I have never been sorry to you as master. How about this, you and I sneak out of Lingjian sect together and go to Yezhu, how about that? If nothing else, I can assure you that you are capable of making alchemy and weapons. Zuyun has been staying in Lingjian section, to put it harshly, he has never seen the world. He didn't know what level he was capable of. But he believed Sun Suanhua's words somewhat. When he first entered the valley, Sun Suanhua was indeed a bit harsh on him. But if he didn't irritate Sun Suanhua, they would get along harmoniously. Moreover, Sun Suanhua did not hide anything from him at this time, which showed that things were indeed a bit dangerous for Sun Suanhua. Master, my disciple is joking with you, Zuyun smiled slightly, already having a decision in his heart. Instead of sneaking out of the valley with Sun Suanhua, it is better to stay in the valley. By then, there will be no one in the valley, and he will have more time to practice in the Dao-glazed mirror. And if he can take over Sun Suanhua's job, Lingjian sect will not embarrass him. Little baby, are you leaving? Sun Suanhua was eager to know what Zuyun was thinking. Zuyun shook his head and said, Master, how long will it take for the people from Wanjian Mountain to come here? If the same disciples in the foundation establishment stage travel day and night, it will take at least 2 months. But those in Wanjian Mountain can't say for sure. They often send elders in the core formation stage to send people off. If this is the case, it will take about a month at most. Zuyun pondered for a moment and said, Master, I have something to do these days. After I do something good, how about you sneak away alone? Little baby, you. Sun Suanhua was greatly puzzled. Master, everyone has his or her own ambitions, and disciples also have self-awareness. I am focused on cultivation. Even if I go to Yezhu with you, with my 5 spiritual roots, it will be extremely difficult for me to gain a firm foothold. Sun Suanhua nodded. Zuyun's words made sense. For more than a year, Zuyun has never given up practicing, but he only cares about whether Zuyun has mastered his skills, which will help him escape. He has never asked about Zuyun's realm and skills. Disciples can do what you have done in Lingjian sect all these years. I believe that after you leave, Lingjian sect will not send anyone to chase you, right? Sun Suanhua nodded again. In this way, Master will have nothing to worry about. He only needs to avoid the people who encounter Wanjian Mountain on the way. However, I have something to ask of you. If Master agrees, I will do my best to protect you from leaving the Spirit Sword sect. Little baby, what's the matter? Sun Suanhua felt that Zuyun was completely different from usual at this time. His tone of voice didn't sound like a teenage cheerifying boy at all. Moreover, Sun Suanhua's problem was analyzed clearly. When the master leaves, the disciple will tell the master. Zuyun didn't say it clearly, but kept it secret. You want me to help Zhang Tianyuan get revenge? Sun Suanhua only thought of this possibility. Zuyun shook his head and said, Master, I told you that I will tell you before I leave. Good boy, Sun Suanhua blew his beard and glared, but there was nothing he could do to Zuyun. Now Zuyun agreed to cooperate with him in escaping, which was much better than his original sneaky way. Halfway through the words, he said in frustration, Okay, Okay. Come on, you little kid, don't cheat me then. Master, don't worry. Zuyun laughed and said, you go and prepare the things you want to take away, but, keep those 3,000 books. In addition, you have to copy your experience of the 7 skills in the past few days and give them to me. My dear, you are taking advantage of the situation. Sun Suanhua said with wide eyes. Your master called me, but you ran away. If you don't leave the true inheritance, wouldn't my master call you in vain? Zuyun spoke eloquently, leaving Sun Suanhua speechless. After a long while, he said, my dear, my master suddenly thought of something. What words? Ginger is hotter when old, but hot pepper is hot when small. Don't worry, I won't be able to take many things with me when I'm leaving, so I'll write down all my thoughts in the next few days. After saying that, Sun Suanhua stood up, feeling relaxed for a while. As he left Zuyun's room, he suddenly said, my son, when I leave, I will tell you something else, so as to save you from coming to Yao Kingdom in the future. I can't recognize Master's name. Zuyun waved his hands and said, Master, go back and pack up your bed quickly. A night of silence. The next day it was slightly bright, and Zuyun left the valley. At this time, few Lingjian sect disciples get up to practice hard. Zuyun rushed all the way towards the misty sword cliff, and soon he reached the road down the mountain. Standing at the entrance of the cave, he couldn't help but use his spiritual sense to explore, only to realize that he couldn't feel a trace of Menghui's aura. Isn't this little girl without spiritual power? Why did she run away? He was surprised. Yesterday, he was holding one hand when he came out of the formation. How come one night passed and there was no trace of him? Confused, he walked into the cave and was shocked again. You, dead. You're the one who died. Menghui huddled in the corner, and when he saw it was Zuyun, he cursed softly and stood up. It's strange, why can't I feel your breath? Zuyunkai said. You. How can you detect this palace's breath-containing method in a small period of refining your energy? Don't underestimate the chi refining stage. Zuyun couldn't get used to Menghui's condescending attitude, and said disdainfully, yesterday, I don't know which pill-forming stage a 500-year-old witch was saved by me. Oh, return it to me. Menghui rolled his eyes and stretched out a slender little finger. In your chi refining period, when I followed the palace master to kill Wanjian Mountain, you didn't even know you were pinched to death. How many? Bragging, Zuyun didn't even look at her, and said, if you were so strong, how could you be caught and suppressed by the people of Wanjian Mountain? Besides, there is nothing to show off about defeating the weak with the strong. Menghui realized that he could not speak to Zuyun at all, and he was still the one who was angry if he continued talking. He couldn't help pouting and said, did you come here today to brag to me? Zuyun reached out and took out a porcelain bottle from his storage bag, shaking it in front of Menghui's eyes. Do you know what kind of elixir this is? Bigu pill. Menghui blinked his eyes and said. Seeing that Zuyun didn't respond, Heki pill. Essence nourishing pill. Huanglong Dan. Zuyun kept shaking his head. You little brat, don't tell me this is the longevity pill. Menghui was angry, his pretty face was cold and sullen. Zuyun chuckled and said, you're so ugly. Come on, smile for me, and I'll give you this longevity pill. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 45. Is it really the longevity pill? Menghui subconsciously didn't believe it. But seeing that Zuyun's expression didn't seem to be fake, he became excited. Hurry up and give it to me. Yesterday, those foundation building periods passed outside the cave, and I was frightened. Menghui stretched out his delicate little hand and snatched it away from Zuyun. Foundation building period. Zuyun's heart trembled. There must have been too much movement yesterday, which attracted the sect leader and the others. No wonder this little girl said that others couldn't discover her breath-containing method. Just like that, the porcelain bottle appeared in Meng Wei's palm. I saw her pouring out the elixir and exclaimed, "You made this from blood ginseng? You actually have blood ginseng." Zuyun was just about to explain that he just wanted to try out the blood ginseng, but he saw Meng Wei stuffing the elixir into his mouth. "Hey, aren't you afraid this is poison?" Zuyun asked curiously. "I can't mistake the smell of this blood ginseng," Meng Wei said happily, "such a huge medicinal power. This is at least a blood ginseng that is more than 10,000 years old. Little brat, where did you get it from?" Feeling that his burned lifespan was gradually replenished, Meng Wei was in a great mood. Zuyun muttered in a low voice, "You are laughing, but you are calling me a little brat. What did you say?" Meng Wei smiled broadly, only focusing on the medicine dissolving in his lower abdomen, and did not hear clearly what Zuyun said. "I didn't say anything," Zuyun rolled his eyes and said, "How much lifespan have you increased?" That's what he cares about. "At least 100 years. Now, I can find a place to practice and regain my strength." As she said that, her face turned cold for a moment. "When I return to my peak, I will definitely kill thousands of people in Wanjian Mountain." Hey, hey, Zuyun said dissatisfied, "didn't you agree to help me find Ergu? Why don't you keep your word?" "Humph," Meng Wei snorted coldly, "I still need to find my natal magic weapon before I can kill Wanjian Mountain. Before that, I will naturally look for those two dogs." "What are you in a hurry for?" Zuyun was dissatisfied when he said he was going to fall out, but at the moment, he seemed to have nothing to do with her. If this little witch dared to speak so loudly before, Zuyun would have dared to beat her. But her lifespan has been extended by 100 years. If it burns again, will she be able to survive the pill formation stage? Suddenly, Zuyun rolled his eyes and said, "Anyway, you have to keep your word. You haven't recovered your strength yet, so it's useless to be mean to me. 100 years is not too much, not too much. It will take at least 50 years for me to regain my strength." Lifespan is not that much. Meng Wei also knew that he was indeed a bit cruel to Zuyun. His expression he softened a little and said, Meng Wei, always keep my word, so don't worry. You saved my life. Unless Ergu dies, I will definitely find him first." But what?" Zuyun said directly, "I don't care whether you want revenge or not. I can still refine the Xiao Yuan Dan here. You must first find Ergu and then protect him." "What, you still have the Xiao Yuan Dan?" Meng Wei stood up with a roar, his eyes full of disbelief. "Of course, old god," Zuyun said, "didn't you teach Ergu how to practice? After you find him, you can't let anything happen to him. When I go to Yezhu and find you, I will take care of you then." "Revenge? You really have? If it can really increase longevity, Meng Wei will naturally not be in a hurry to kill Wang Jianshan. She knew that she would not be able to break through to the nascent soul stage within 100 years. "I thought I could kill some people from Wanjian Mountain before I died, so I killed more. Yaluo sect has been destroyed, and 100 years of life is not enough for her to stand up again. Well, I can swear that I still have it. It's just that it will take a few days. I need to go home to visit my relatives. You can recover well now, and I will be back in a few days." "Visiting relatives? Haven't you cut off all ties in this world?" Meng Wei was very curious. She grew up in Yaluo sect and knew that the sect leader was her adoptive mother. But everyone in the sect told her that those who cultivate immortality must cut off contact with their mortal relatives before they can cultivate the great path. Otherwise, you will be tied down by the secular world and hinder your cultivation. Zuyun said angrily, "You are over 500 years old, and I am only 11 years old. What kind of fate should I have to cut off?" Sure enough, you are a little brat. Meng Wei turned his eyes, showed the whites of his eyes at Zhu Yun, and said, how long will it take for you to come back? I'm afraid those in the foundation building stage will come again. As little as 5 days, as much as half a month. Don't worry, I always keep my word. Okay, it's a deal. Meng Wei extended his palm to Zhu Yun and said, let's high-five as an oath. Zhu Yun pressed his palm against it, feeling that Meng Wei's palm was weak and boneless, and asked in surprise, why do you look younger than me after you have lived for 500 years? Meng Wei said angrily, it's none of your business. Get out of here, I'll be annoyed by you. Zhu Yun chuckled and said, I still have something to ask you. I also have a friend named Daegu. He has the dual spiritual roots of gold and wood. Do you think it is appropriate to go to Wanjian Mountain to practice? Meng Wei snorted and smiled again, you are really interesting. Your friend's name is Ergu and Daegu. By the way, I don't know your name yet. Is your name Sangu? Zhu Yun was greatly embarrassed and said angrily, that's why people in the mountains get nicknames so that they can live longer. And my name is Zhu Yun. This name sounds much more pleasant to my ears. Meng Wei nodded and said seriously, the double spirit roots of Jinlin are very suitable for the sword art of Wanjian Mountain. If you didn't say that you have the longevity pill, I don't recommend it. He goes to Wanjian Mountain. Why? Zhu Yun was slightly startled. You don't have the longevity pill. I will kill Wang Jianshan in 50 years. That big dog may become a dead dog by then. Meng Wei glanced sideways at him and saw that Zhu Yun's face was ashen. He stuck out his tongue and continued, but don't worry, I'm not in a hurry now. You let the big dog learn Wang Jianshan's sword skills quickly. For 100 years, just change to another sect. Can this sect be changed at will? Zhu Yun didn't understand this. Meng Wei said, there are thousands of sects in Yezhu, who knows where that big dog has gone. Furthermore, no matter how talented he is in cultivation, unless he reaches the elixir forming stage, who will care about a little monk who is building a foundation? Zhu Yun was relieved, but he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The leader of a sect in Yunzhou was only in the foundation building stage, but looking at Yezhu, no one cared. No wonder Yunzhou is said to be a barren land for cultivation. It seems that I have to go to Yezhu as soon as possible in order to succeed in cultivation. The subsequent pages of 5 elements of Chaos Sutra can only be seen if you have a high level. Meng Wei, thank you. Zhu Yun stood up and said. Meng Wei raised his head, a glint flashed in his eyes, and said, I have killed more people than you have ever seen. But you are the first one to say thank you to me. You helped me, shouldn't I say thank you? Zhu Yun asked back. Meng Wei was silent. Zhu Yun could be said to have saved her life, but she never said thank you. Even at this time, she didn't express anything to Zhu Yun about Xiao Yu and Dan. On the contrary, I told him about Wang Jianshan and received his thanks. After a while, Meng Wei spoke. Hurry up and go back to visit your relatives. Zhu Yun nodded, turned around and left the cave. Meng Wei murmured, what an interesting little kid. Zhu Yun was not in a hurry to return to the valley, but rushed to the sect master's hall. Along the way, cracks appeared in many houses, which made him secretly shocked by the amount of movement yesterday. Soon, he found the big dog practicing his sword in his small courtyard. He seemed unaffected. Compared to the last time we met, Big Dog's sword skills have become even better. Big Dog! Zhu Yun shouted quickly. Xiao Zhu, why are you here? The big dog took back his magic sword and walked over. Where's the sect master? Zhu Yun asked. I don't know. The ground inside the sect collapsed yesterday. Master stayed with the elders in the sect master's hall for a long time and then left. He didn't return all night. Zhu Yun breathed a sigh of relief. He was afraid that someone would notice him when he came to look for the big dog, so he whispered, when you go to Wanjian Mountain, you must learn the sword techniques there. The big dog felt strange and said, Xiaozu, I have never been lazy in my cultivation of immortality. I haven't finished speaking yet, Zuyun continued, after you learn the skills, you must leave Wanjian Mountain within 100 years. Why? I heard from my master that Wanjian Mountain is a huge sect. It is thousands of times bigger than our spirit sword sect. Zuyun smiled bitterly, not knowing how to explain it to Big Dog, so he simply said, Big Dog, let me tell you, Ergu already has a sect in Yezhu. I will also go there by then, so that the three of us can be together again. What? Ergu went to Yezhu? Isn't he recovering from his injuries? The big dog always thought that the second dog was in Zuyun's valley, and he didn't even take the initiative to ask Zuyun. He recovered from his injuries a long time ago and then went to Yezhu. Let me tell you, he has also reached the 5th level of Qi refining. Zuyun knew that De Go only wanted to practice, so he used Ergo's realm to stimulate him and divert his attention. What? Ergu is also at the 5th level? His third spiritual root is also. Sure enough, the big dog was shocked immediately. Zuyun breathed a sigh of relief and then said, so, when the time comes, you go to Wanjian Mountain and learn your skills. Then the three of us can be together again. A trace of doubt flashed in the big dog's eyes, and then he said, Xiaozu, how about I stop going to Wanjian Mountain and go to Ergu first? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 46. As soon as De Go said these words, Zuyun immediately became nervous. He had no choice but to deceive De Go. If Big Dog doesn't go to Wanjian Mountain, he will have nowhere to go. Furthermore, if someone comes to Wanjian Mountain by then, that may be Big Dog's best chance. Big Dog, you listen to me, your Jinlin Shuangling route is the most suitable for practicing Wanjian Mountain sword art. Moreover, I heard that Wanjian Mountain may send seniors who are in the pill formation stage, that will be your best chance. Senior of the Dan formation stage. The big dog's breathing suddenly became rapid. He is still training hard to reach the 6th level of Qi refining, and the foundation building stage is the sky he looks up to, let alone the pill forming stage. Big Dog, the one who took Ergo away, is also a senior in the Dan formation stage. He happened to be passing by here and said that Ergo's spiritual roots are suitable for his sex martial arts. So. I know. Xiaozu, you have to work hard. You have 5 spiritual roots and are slow to cultivate. When you go to Yezhu, you must tell us. Ergu and I will protect you then. The big dog looked at Zuyun and said seriously. Zuyun breathed a sigh of relief, as long as he was willing to go to Wanjian Mountain. You remember my words, leave Wanjian Mountain within 100 years. Do you know? The big dog nodded and urged, I know. I'm going to practice, so you should go back and practice. Before Zuyun left, he repeatedly told the big dog not to tell anyone what he said today, and then he left with peace of mind and returned to the valley. Good disciple, you are finally back. Are you tired? Master made you a pot of spiritual tea. As soon as he came out of the fog formation, Sun Suanhu greeted Zuyun with a smile. Zuyun was also dumbfounded when he looked at the tea sets placed on the wooden table beside the ditch. Master, have you packed everything? Zuyun said helplessly. There is nothing to deal with as a teacher. Here, this is the experience you want. I have always kept it as a teacher, and now I have passed it on to you. Sun Suanhua took out a yellowed book and placed it carefully on the table. Zuyun took it and flipped through a few pages at random. It was indeed written by Sun Suanhua himself, and stuffed it directly into the storage bag. Then he said, Master, I plan to leave tomorrow. Why don't we have a drink? Drink wine. Sun Suanhua looked Zuyun up and down and said, What kind of wine do you want to drink, my master? This wine is spiritual wine and is used for cultivation. It is not just for ordinary people to relieve their greed and relieve their worries. I just want to drink today, just tell me whether I will give it to you or not. Zuyun acted rogue. You're such a little kid, how dare you threaten me as a teacher? Sun Suanhua was blowing his beard and glaring again. He finally managed to show off his old face today, but Zuyun was stunned and refused to give him any face. Master, this disciple is wrong, Zuyun pretended to be subdued and timidly said, This disciple has offended Master, now I will go back and face the wall for 100 days. After saying that, he actually walked towards his house. Sun Suanhua was anxious, No, 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 don't we just have a drink? I will get it for you right now. Did he know that Zuyun could really do such a thing? Not to mention 100 days, people from Wanjian Mountain may come within 30 days. Based on his understanding of Wanjian Mountain, the elders in the pill formation stage must have their spiritual consciousness covering the entire Lingjian section by then, there will be no place for him to hide. Little kid, if I hadn't asked you for help now, I wouldn't have taught you a lesson to boost my authority. Sun Suanhua cursed secretly in his heart, and heard Zuyun shout again, Master, I won't come home until I'm drunk today. Sun Suanhua hurriedly responded, What a kind, good disciple. Would you like Master to prepare some food and drinks? Thank you, Master. Zuyun was not polite at all, which made Sun Suanhua feel depressed for a while. After a stick of incense, Sun Suanhua came over with several wine jars, put them on the wooden table angrily, and said, Master, I have all the wine here over the years. I originally planned to keep it when I ran away. Drink on the road. Hey, Master, don't you need to run away now? As long as you leave the Lingjian sect, the sky is as high as birds can fly, and the sea is as wide as fish can jump. Sun Suanhua was unable to refute, because Zuyun said so. As long as Gujian could supply the elixirs, talismans, etc. needed by the Lingjian sect, the Lingjian sect would never have thought that he could escape. Master, why don't you go prepare the food and drinks? Zuyun opened the wine seal and poured it into the teacup. You really want me to cook for you? Sun Suanhua thought Zuyun was joking, but he didn't expect him to be serious. With so much wine, how can we drink it without food? Zuyun waved his hand and said, Master, good master, I have been following you for a year, but I have never tasted your craftsmanship. Besides, when we leave one day, I don't know if we are destined to meet again. You little kid, Sun Suanhua felt that what Zuyun said was indeed reasonable, so he stood up, but he couldn't keep his face down. Okay, I'll just do it. After Sun Suanhua left, Zuyun immediately entered the day-glazed mirror with 2 wine cups. After putting it down, it came out immediately. Not long after, Sun Suanhua brought a few side dishes over. Seeing that there seemed to be a little wine missing on the table, and there was no empty wine cup beside the table, he couldn't help but wonder, Little boy, have you hidden the wine? Zuyun stared and said, Master, how could I be that kind of person? Come on, let me show you the storage bag to see if I have any wine. Sun Suanhua didn't look at it, put the dishes on the table, and then said seriously, Little boy, if you really want to avenge Zhang Tianyuan, you must be careful. There are intrigues in the world of immortality. You have never been out of the mountain. Remember, hold on, you have to get rid of the roots. After a pause, Sun Suanhua said again, I lent you the sword last time, so you don't have to return it. Although it's not a good thing, it was carefully crafted for my master. Zuyun was moved again, knowing that Sun Suanhua was not against him avenging Zhang Tianyuan, but was afraid that something would really happen to him. Perhaps, at first, it was because of interests. But when the relationship between them became mutually beneficial, Sun Suanhua would naturally remember the relationship between master and disciple. Master, let me toast you. Zuyun picked up the cup in a decent manner and drank it all in one gulp. Good boy, if you have the chance, leave Lingjian sect, leave Yunzhou and see a wider world. But before that, you must practice well. This time, Sun Suanhua finally said something Zuyun liked to hear. Over the past year, watching Zuyun's momentum gradually increase, he had actually known for a long time that Zuyun would have an adventure. It's just that what realm and how to practice are not important to him. It has nothing to do with him wanting to leave. In fact, the higher the realm, the faster you can learn his skills. Master, I will do it. Zuyun filled Sun Suanhua's cup, and the two drank one cup after another. Until all the wine was finished, everyone returned to the house. The next day, before dawn, Zuyun came to the mountain gate. Senior brother Li Chang, could you please register? I want to go back to visit my relatives. Qin Liken said in surprise, fifth junior brother, have you been here for a year? Zuyun smiled and said, yes, it's been a year. According to the rules, right. It's true, Qin Liken sighed, this time has passed too fast. I think when you came, you were still a little kid who didn't understand anything. But now. He didn't say anything else. Zhang Tianyuan, who brought them here, died, and Zhou Huanghua, the second dog who came with them, suddenly disappeared. Just the day before yesterday, a landslide occurred in the sect, which frightened all the sect members. It takes no time to cultivate immortality, senior brother Liken. Zuyun said with a smile. Qin Liken nodded and looked at Zuyun, full of momentum and presence. That's right, you don't have time to cultivate immortality, Qin Liken laughed and reminded, you can just go. But remember, you can only visit relatives for 10 days at most. If you don't return after 10 days, the sect's law enforcement hall will send deacons to the wilderness. Shishan, do you remember? Zuyun had no intention of escaping in the first place, so he nodded to indicate that he was clear, and then walked towards the road away from the mountain. A year ago. He went up the mountain ignorantly. 1 year later. He went down the mountain with hatred and expectation. When he finished drinking yesterday, Sun Suanhua took out some fine gold and soft silver and gave it to Zuyun, saying that it would be used as payment for his expenses. Just returning to barren Stone Mountain is enough. Of course, Zuyun shamelessly wanted some spiritual stones, but in the end, Sun Suanhua was so angry that he left with a dark face. Zuyun knew that it was not because Sun Suanhua refused to give it, but because he didn't have it himself. They are really poor. Zuyun found it interesting after thinking about it, and walked all the way to the market town at the foot of the mountain. After looking around, he found a restaurant. After Zuyun entered the house, he took out a silver ingot and threw it to the waiter at the door. Fine wine and good tea are served on the table. If you have more, your reward will be calculated. When the waiter saw Zuyun with a long sword hanging at his waist, dressed in a monk's attire, and spending so generously, he didn't dare to underestimate his age, so he quickly responded and went to take care of it. But before the food was served, 3 monks sat at Zuyun's table. Is this a fellow Taoist from the Lingjian sect? There were 3 monks, 2 men and 1 woman, and the one who spoke was a tall man with a beard. While speaking, he also conveniently placed a ghost-headed sword on the table. Zuyun raised his eyebrows slightly, pretending to be cold and said, exactly, 3 fellow Taoists, what's the matter? The female cultivator laughed sweetly and said, the 3 of us, brother and sister, saw that our Taoist friend was so majestic and already at the 3rd level of Qi refining at such a young age. He must be the proud son of the Lingjian sect, so naturally we wanted to make friends with him. Another male cultivator had ugly features and showed a smile that was even uglier than crying, it's true, fellow Taoist, Don't be offended. Today's table of wine and food is a treat for my brother and sister. After saying that, he took out a piece of gold and placed it gently on the table. Zuyun was shocked. These casual cultivators could actually see his own realm. But he soon relaxed. No matter how low his level was, didn't he kill Wan Laojin who was in the foundation building stage? Take a look at these three first and tell me what you want from me. Zuyun smiled slightly and said, I just got master's permission to come down the mountain to practice. I'm very happy to make some friends. I'd better treat this guest. He pushed the gold ingot back to the ugly man. The three of them were stunned. They just came to test Zuyun. They didn't expect him to be so experienced. Is it possible that he is really a disciple of a big shot in the spirit sword sect? However, in this case, it is also possible that there is a fat sheep. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 47. These three casual cultivators have been together for many years, and their tacit understanding is self-evident. Just by looking at each other, they knew what they were thinking. Although Zuyun rejected their deliberate kindness, the news they wanted to know was already revealed in his words. The female cultivator chuckled and said, Fellow Taoist is so straightforward. My brother and sister like to make friends with people like Taoist friend the most. Yes, Zhou Xiu nodded and said, as expected of a disciple from a large sect, he is not comparable to us casual cultivators. The bearded man smiled heartily, then lowered his voice and said, Fellow Taoist is just going down the mountain to practice. Is there any good place to go? Are you asking for information? Zuyun remained calm, thinking that no matter where he said he was going, these three people would probably find a reason to follow him. He simply said generously, I want to go to Barren Stone Mountain to visit. I heard that Barren Stone Mountain is bounded by the mountainside, and the top and bottom are completely different. I thought I would try my luck. Barren Rock Mountain? I've heard of that place too, it's actually pretty good. The bearded man followed Zuyun's words and winked at the female cultivator. The female cultivator understood and said with a smile, Brother, we have nothing to do, and we have met this fellow Taoist like before. Why don't we go together and go to the Barren Rock Mountain to have a look? I also happen to have someone to look after me along the way. The ugly cultivator followed. It is often said in the world that there must be monsters when things go wrong, and there must be treasures in natural phenomena. There is such a scene in this Barren Rock Mountain. Maybe we will have some adventures when we go there. Zuyun squinted his eyes, it was just as he expected. These three casual cultivators probably rely on killing people and selling goods to obtain training resources. I just don't know if they are the murderers of Zhang Tianyuan. Zuyun didn't expect that he would meet him so easily, but he didn't dare to jump to conclusions without evidence. These three people could see through their own realm at a glance, and then came up to them, so they must not be on guard against them. Not as good as. He rolled his eyes and said with a smile, That's great. It's my first time going down the mountain and I'm walking alone. If there are three Taoist friends to look after me all the way, I will be very grateful. Ha ha ha, easy to say, easy to say. It's not easy for us to embark on this path of cultivating immortals. If we meet by fate, we will naturally take care of each other. If the Lingjian sect can accept some outer disciples in the future, please give some information to the three of me. The big man with the beard said with a smile, and found a reason for his purpose of befriending Zuyun. Zuyun readily agreed, having already made plans to test it in his heart. He reached out and took out a cup of spiritual wine from his storage bag. I have to rely on three fellow Taoists to take care of me along the way. I am very grateful. As he said this, he lowered his voice and said, This is the spiritual wine I brought from the sect, and ordinary fellow disciples don't have it. The three brothers and we hit it off right away, let's enjoy the spirit wine today. Zuyun deliberately stretched his head, but actually released his spiritual consciousness slightly and observed the expressions of the three people. Sure enough, the greedy look disappeared in the eyes of these three people. He didn't say what kind of spiritual wine it was, but he could see the three people's postures clearly, and they even made eye contact. Zuyun's heart tightened and he was ready to explode. However, the bearded man unexpectedly refused. Zuyun was slightly startled, "Isn't it?" I saw the big man put his hand on the wine cup and said seriously, "This spiritual wine that fellow Taoist brought out must be good. But drinking it here is too showy. When I go to Barren Stone Mountain, find a place to sit. It's not too late to come down and have a good chat." "Brother is right, wealth must not be exposed," the female cultivator said quickly. "Although there are mostly mortals in this town, there are also many cultivators secretly watching. If you are targeted by a strong person, you will be in trouble." "Yes, I suffered a big loss last time. There are dragons and snakes at the foot of the mountain, and there is a market 10 miles away. If someone followed me all the way to Barren Stone Mountain." Zhou Xiu also shook his head. After hearing the three people talking separately, Zuyun understood immediately. It's not that they don't want the wine, but they want to kill people and steal goods in the wilderness. Zhang Tianyuan is just an ordinary monk, but between the lines of his words just now, he said he was out for training. The identity is different. Besides, this wine cup can hold 10 wine gourds. How could you not be moved? Don't expose your wealth. Do you really think I don't know? Zuyun had already determined that these three people were the murderers, but he put away the wine with a pretended regret and said, "I can't have a happy drink with the three of them, alas." The big man with the beard smiled heartily and said, "Wouldn't it be nice to go to Barren Rock Mountain and drink at night with the stars above your head anywhere?" "That's right," Zhou Xiu nodded. "How can such a good wine be worthy of this mundane food? We went to Barren Stone Mountain, and we will pick some spiritual fruits to drink, so as not to waste natural resources. It's only a day's journey to Barren Rock Mountain. Why don't we set off at this time? Isn't it just right when night falls?" the female cultivator said with a smile. Zuyun's eyes lit up and he said, "What a great idea. Why don't we set off now? There's no rush, no hurry." The bearded man pointed at the table and said with a smile, "This is a guest invited by fellow Taoist. If the dishes are not even served, wouldn't it be a waste of fellow Taoists' good intentions?" It has to be said that these three people spoke in an orderly manner. If Zuyun had not correctly guessed their identities, he would have been involved and unable to figure out their thoughts. "That's right, fellow Taoist, we often travel far, so we have a carriage ready. When we finish eating, wouldn't it be nice to sit in the carriage and go together? An ordinary meal, everyone has their own agenda." Zuyun originally entered the restaurant just to take a look around, but he didn't expect to gain so much. "Although I was excited, I also knew that a battle was inevitable. It's not like he has never killed one against three. But I also know that if you want to have a higher winning rate, you must find an opportunity to kill one person in a sneak attack first." After making a decision in his mind, Zuyun thought that they had just mentioned the city 10 miles away. He had heard that Fangxi was a centralized place for exchanging resources among monks. When he was going to Yao Kingdom, he would definitely go to Fangxi to prepare some things. It's not a bad thing to plan ahead and find out early. "Three Taoist friends, I have just come down the mountain, but I have never seen this monk's village. When I come back, can you take me to gain some knowledge?" After hearing what Zuyun said, the three of them started talking to each other about things about Fangxi. There is no need to hide these, they can just divert Zuyun's attention, so why not? Half an hour later, the four of them were eating happily and chatting happily. Zuyun got to know Fangxi, which was equivalent to a place where some monks organized themselves to buy and sell goods. It was no different from his village in Barren Stone Mountain. Every month, there are always 2 days when brokers gather to collect some things. The only difference is that the markets are all about exchanging cultivation resources or buying and selling spiritual stones. However, the scale of this market is very small, and most of them are monks in the chi refining stage. It is rare to see a foundation building stage in a year. The carriage staggered onto the road. The ugly cultivator was driving the carriage, the big man was leaning on the shaft of the carriage, while the female cultivator and Zuyun were sitting in the carriage. This is the tacit understanding of the three casual cultivators who have been working together for many years. With only a female cultivator by his side, it would naturally be easy for Zuyun to relax his vigilance and possibly come up with more things to say. Zuyungsu and Wei Snake pretended to chat, but the female cultivator relaxed a lot. From time to time, she tapped the wooden edge of the carriage with her fingers. Zuyun didn't understand what it meant, but he knew it was conveying information. However, there was nothing unusual about the carriage, and Zuyun was not in a hurry to take action. The sun was setting, and the carriage had already reached a wilderness. Seeing that there was no one around, the big man winked, and Joshiu drove the carriage around a corner and drove towards the back slope of a hill. Zuyun did not relax his vigilance. He seemed to be taking a nap, but in fact he was just pretending to be asleep. As soon as the carriage turned around, it was already known that these three people were probably going to take action. Are you so impatient? Not even Barren Rock Mountain. Zuyun sneered in his heart, and when the carriage was bumpy, he suddenly turned over and took out a fireball talisman and an earth shield talisman respectively and clasped them between his hands. You want to be a hunter, but you don't know that in my eyes, you are the prey. Suddenly, the carriage jolted to a stop, and the female cultivator groaned and shouted to the outside, "Brother, second brother, what's going on? This car is in disrepair and is broken down. It's getting late, I'm afraid we have to stay here all night." The big man complained. "Ah, why is it so unfortunate?" The female cultivator stood up and complained, but a fierce light flashed across her eyes. She thought Zuyun didn't see it, so she said helplessly to Zuyun, "Fellow Taoist, let's come down and take a look first." After that, he reached out and pulled the curtain to get out of the car. Zuyun's face was frozen, and a fireball talisman was suddenly thrown at the female cultivator's back. "I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills." Author, Banzwan Xianxia. Chapter 48. Third sister, be careful. As soon as the talisman was used, it immediately turned into a ball of fire. The two male cultivators outside the car were doing murder and robbery, so their reactions were naturally not weak. Feeling the heat wave coming, they immediately cried out in fear. Although Zuyun was going down the mountain for the first time, he was not a young man who knew nothing. As soon as the fireball talisman was used, he immediately crushed a soil shield talisman. The huge and thick Kaki shield helped him resist the explosion of the fireball. Boom! The fireball hit the female cultivator's back directly. She didn't have time to scream before she was swallowed by the fireball. She didn't have time to scream. At the same time, the carriage exploded with a loud bang. "Daiu, we are traveling with you with good intentions. Why did you suddenly attack? Are you relying on being a disciple of the Spirit Sword sect to look down on us casual cultivators?" The bearded man held his sword in front of him, blocking a turbulent flow of fireballs, and shouted at Zuyun angrily. The ugly cultivator cast a water spell to extinguish the flames burning on the female cultivator. Zuyun sneered and didn't talk nonsense with him. Ever since he knew that they were the murderers who killed Zhang Tianyuan, Zuyun never thought of holding back. Those who kill, will be killed. You did it on the first day, of course I can do it on the 15th. Without saying a word, Zuyun threw a fireball talisman at the bearded man. No matter how strong he is just a cultivator in the chi refining stage. And this fireball talisman is comparable to a blow in the foundation establishment stage. However, this is not a sneak attack. The bearded man easily dodged it, and the fireball fell to the ground with another loud noise. Second brother, don't worry about the third sister, let's kill this kid together first. The bearded man is experienced. If he doesn't give up saving people at this time, I'm afraid he will have to die here. Brother, I'm coming. The ugly cultivator took out a disc-shaped magic weapon from his waist upon hearing this, and rushed towards Zuyun. Zuyun threw another fireball talisman without saying a word. The bearded man saw this, his eyes flashed, and he dodged and chopped from the other side. Zuyun knew what they were thinking, and it could even be said that this was the flaw that Zuyun deliberately exposed. As long as the two did not attack head-on at the same time, he would naturally be able to attack them separately. He paused, and the fireball talisman was replaced by a golden light talisman. While throwing it at the ugly cultivator, he took out the inferior magic sword given by Sun Suanhua from his waist with one hand and pointed it at the bearded man. Boy, you dare to fight my 6th level sword with your 3rd level chi training sword? You are courting death. The bearded man felt that Zuyun was clearly seeking death. He has been struggling in the world of immortal cultivation for so many years, with no one to rely on, and his judgment of the situation is extremely accurate. Zuyun's move will definitely kill him. He gathered his spiritual power, and the black light on the ghost head knife flowed, and spiritual power surged. In the blink of an eye, he raised his head and rushed to Zuyun, chopping off his head. Die. However, at this time, the golden light talisman had exploded, and a golden light suddenly shone into his eyes. The bearded man was shocked, and he couldn't stop the knife even if he wanted to. So he just stopped? He didn't believe that a 3rd level chi refining could still escape. At the same time, the ugly cultivator had just dodged the golden light talisman. Like Zuyun, he turned his back to the golden light. His eyes were only slightly blurred, and he was not affected much. This is one of the weaknesses of the golden light talisman. The golden light is not in the eyes, and it has almost no effect. In a blur, he saw Zuyun facing the knife and his back to him. He couldn't help but grin and smashed the disc magic weapon in his hand towards Zuyun. What a pity. Zuyun remained calm in the face of danger, a disdainful smile flashed across the corner of his mouth, but his feet took the steps of eternal life secret. In the past year, he has never stopped practicing this step. The bearded man had impaired eyesight and could not see that Zuyun had dodged. He always thought that Zuyun wanted to fight him with a sword, and he didn't hesitate at all. Not only did the ghost head knife not reduce its momentum, he even used his full strength. And the ugly cultivator, seeing that Zuyun had his back to him at first, was even more thinking of a sneak attack, thinking about responding to his eldest brother, and at the same time ignoring the talisman he dodged, which was not actually a fireball talisman. He just wanted to smash Zuyun to death. However, Zuyun dodged at the critical moment. Not only did his attack miss, but he had to face his eldest brother's full-strength attack. He didn't know that Zuyun had already mastered the use of spiritual consciousness in the Qi refining period because he practiced the 5 Elements Chaos Sutra. He had long known the actions of these two people. This is the true knowledge of oneself and the enemy, and 100 battles will never be in danger. Brother, it's me. Seeing the ghost head knife coming at him with an unstoppable momentum, the ugly cultivator was so frightened that he raised the round magic weapon to block in front of him and shouted heartbreakingly. But the bearded man couldn't see at this time, and the ugly cultivator was so close, how could he put the knife away? It was also thanks to the rich experience of the ugly cultivator that he concentrated all his spiritual power on the magic weapon. This was his life magic weapon, and as soon as he thought about it, it glowed with spiritual light. But this spiritual light exploded with a bang under the slash of the ghost head knife. The ugly cultivator spurted blood and flew backwards, and the bearded man was also affected by the extremely strong recoil force, retreated 3 steps, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Both of them are at the 6th level of Qi refining, and their strengths are equal. In this head-on confrontation, no one would feel comfortable. However, the swordsmanship practiced by the bearded man is more domineering, so the ugly cultivator will naturally suffer a loss if he takes it head on. At this time, he also regained his vision. "Boy, you are so brave." When the ghost head knife hit him just now, he had already noticed something was wrong. Seeing the ugly cultivator lying on the ground spitting blood, he was even more furious. He turned his head and looked at Zuyun. Big brother, this kid has tricks. Hurry, kill him quickly." The ugly cultivator was spitting blood while reminding the bearded man. Zuyun laughed and said, "You two can't do anything to me, do you think you can do it alone?" As he said that, he raised the long sword in his hand, and the tip of the sword pointed directly at the bearded man. "Boy, don't run if you have the guts." The bearded man was careful this time. He had just suffered a loss and kept staring at Zuyun's empty hand. He found that he had nothing in his hand and the sword he was holding was a low-grade magic sword, so he rushed up with the knife. "Try the power of my low-grade high-level ghost head knife." Looking at the violent bearded man, Zuyun looked down on him. His Danshan was frantically drawing out the golden spiritual power, and he uttered a few words coldly, "Release the sword energy." The golden light was prominent on the magic sword. The bearded man had only rushed halfway when a waist-wide golden sword energy rushed out. Feeling the fierce power in the sword energy, the bearded man's pupils suddenly shrank. How could this be a third-level chi refining cultivator? This is clearly a method that only a senior in the foundation building period can show. Just talking about the width of the sword energy, he couldn't resist it. "Senior, spare my life." The bearded man made a prompt decision, shouted loudly, threw the ghost head knife out, and knelt down to beg for mercy. However, the sword energy was so fast that it cut his body in half in an instant. Senior, you and I have no grudges or hatred, why do you want to kill me?" The cultivator is tough, although he will die in the end, but this kind of injury can still let him breathe a few more times. "No grudges or hatred." Zuyun sneered, turned and walked towards the ugly cultivator. In comparison, the ugly cultivator was the least injured. Seeing Zuyun coming, the ugly cultivator used his hands and feet to retreat, and the sand and stones on the ground were raised with a cloud of dust. As Zuyun got closer and closer, the ugly cultivator's face was already twisted in fear. He was an outsider in the sword just now, and he saw it more clearly than his eldest brother. Foundation building period. Is this something they can't mess with? Senior, is there a misunderstanding? The ugly cultivator knew that he had no way out, and cried and begged. Misunderstanding. Zuyun stretched out his hand and took out the cup of spiritual wine from the storage bag. Uncover the seal and pour it directly on the ground. The aroma of wine filled the air, and spiritual power surged. But Zhou Xiu didn't dare to breathe. "A year ago, you killed my guide to the immortal gate for a gourd of this spiritual wine. A year later, I will sacrifice the lives of the three of you to his spirit in heaven. This wine is the wine to send you on your way." At this point, the wine in the wine cup had been emptied. Zuyun smashed the wine cup and stabbed Zhou Xiu's chest with a sword. Zhou Xiu realized it later, but it was too late. The bearded man, with only half of his body left, looked ashen. I don't know if he was scared by Zuyun or lost too much blood. Zuyun turned around and said lightly, "If you hadn't done anything unusual with this spiritual wine, I wouldn't have discovered that you were the murderer." After that, he also stabbed him in the chest with a sword. "Cut the grass, uproot it." After the two of them had lost their souls, Zuyun took their storage bags and went to check on the female cultivator who was killed by his fireball talisman first. A charred and smelly corpse lay on the ground, motionless. Zuyun frowned and turned away. He thought that a cultivator in the chi refining stage could not withstand the attack of a fireball talisman comparable to that of the foundation establishment stage. "Brother Zhang, Zuyun, have helped you to avenge your great revenge. When I return to the Spirit Sword sect, I will toast you with another cup of spiritual wine. Zuyun clasped his hands together and spoke loudly in the direction of the Spirit Sword section. Only then did he feel a sense of enlightenment in his heart. He wondered if he was going to break through. Thinking of this, he did not dare to delay, and used his body skills to run quickly towards the direction of the desolate stone mountain. Until night fell, darkness covered the wilderness and swallowed up the charred corpse. No one saw it. The black layers cracked, and a faint breathing sound came from inside. A moment later, a hateful and shrill voice cut through the darkness. I want you to die, I want you to die. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 49. As the sound became weaker and weaker, and finally turned into sobbing, the black scorched shell faded away, and a child-sized figure crawled out from inside. The figure climbed hard to the lower body of the bearded man, dragged his legs back, and joined the upper body together. But the bearded man has already died, so what's the use of trying to fight back? The figure hugged the bearded man and howled for a while, then he remembered that there was that ugly cultivator. By this time, she had regained her composure, and dragged Joshiu's body back, placing it side by side with the bearded man. Then, she knelt down on the ground and kowtowed 3 times and 9 times. Eldest brother, second brother, that boy is cruel and ruthless. If you don't avenge this revenge, my little sister is willing to fall into a place of eternal disaster. But my little sister has lost her life and her body has become the size of a child. She has no choice but to practice from scratch. Don't worry, Lingjian section, my little sister will definitely sneak into it. If it doesn't work in 3 years, then 5 years. If it doesn't work in 5 years, then 10 years. The figure finished these words almost through gritted teeth, and bowed again. Then he staggered towards the direction of Lingjian sect. At this time, Zuyun finally ran to the mountainside of the barren rock. However, not only did he not enter the house, he also bypassed the village far away. The speed was so fast that no sound was made. After running all the way to the top of the cliff, Zuyun jumped onto the natural stone slab where he was. After standing firm, he stepped into the cave and entered the Dewu glazed mirror with a thought. It's neither sooner nor later, I can't bear it any longer. Zuyun murmured, and immediately concentrated his spiritual power and began to attack the bottleneck. The 5-color turntable rotates crazily. Zuyun abandons distracting thoughts and throws all his homesickness out of his mind. The most urgent task is to first let your own small realm break through to the next level. I don't know how long it took, but the speed of the 5-color turntable finally slowed down. Zuyun took a closer look and saw that it was already more than 10% larger than before. Breakthrough. Seeing this scene, Zuyun felt happy. Who said that the cultivation of 5 spiritual roots is slower than others? Even though he is not as good as the big dog who is already at the 5th level of chi refining, he can at least catch up with his fellow disciples who have ordinary 3 or 4 spiritual roots. He repeatedly checked the spiritual power of each color, knowing that there was the same amount, but he couldn't help it. It wasn't until the excitement faded that Zuyun took out a breath and opened his eyes. The small realm has grown by 1 level. I wonder if the scope of spiritual consciousness will become larger. He tried to drive his spiritual consciousness and rushed out of the cave. After a while, the entire medicine garden was covered. Those elixirs that became spirits seemed to have noticed someone watching them. They shook their branches and leaves and found that there was no one around, so they lay lazily on the soil again. Especially the red blood ginseng plant caught Zuyun's attention. At that time, I cut off one of its ginseng tendrils with a sword and made it into a longevity pill, which could increase Menghui's lifespan by 100 years. It's just that at this time, the spiritual consciousness locked on the whole body of the blood ginseng, and no trace of being cut was found on it. Did this elixir restore itself or? Zuyun was puzzled at first, but then he thought about it. 2 days had passed, and comparing the time in the mirror, 10 days had passed. Blood ginseng is also an elixir for essence, so it is not surprising that it has such recovery ability. Thinking of this, Zuyun felt relieved, but a flash of lightning suddenly flashed in his mind, but he couldn't catch it. Forget it, let's go see Dad first. Zuyun withdrew his spiritual consciousness for just a short time, which consumed a lot of his spiritual power. You should know that under normal circumstances, spiritual consciousness will only be available during the foundation building period. When I came out of the mirror, it was already bright outside. The sunlight penetrated the mist in the mountains and reflected the rainbow light. It was colorful and beautiful. If it were the past, Zuyun would definitely be fascinated by it. But now that he has embarked on the path to immortality, all these are just clouds to him. Zuyun recovered his thoughts and estimated that his breakthrough should have taken 2 days. If he didn't have the day-glazed mirror, he might not have been able to rush back before the people from Wanjian Mountain arrived at Lingjian sect. At this time, Dad should have just gotten up to chop wood. He will go back later. A smile flashed across Zuyun's lips, thinking about how Zurong would react when he suddenly appeared. Using the light from the mountain, he began to examine the cave. Last time I didn't pay close attention and was taken away by Zhang Tianyuan. At this time, it seems that this cave is ordinary. There were only traces of digging by someone, so Zuyun guessed that it should be the work of the senior who left the fragments of the Diwu glazed mirror. The cave is not big, even a little crude. The innermost part was just covered with some straw and was a bit messy. The senior must have used it as a bed. Zuyun glanced around again, and suddenly felt that something was wrong with the straw. If someone often sleeps on it, the straw will definitely be flattened instead of being so loose. He frowned slightly, and his spiritual consciousness came out. Suddenly, his expression changed drastically. Just because there was a corpse under the straw. Senior, died here. Zuyun murmured, thought for a moment, and then stepped forward carefully. Pulling away the straw, a skeleton in ragged clothes fell into his eyes. The straw rubbed against the clothes under Zuyun's stirring, and immediately turned into pink ash. It was obviously very old. He's been dead for at least 100 years, right? Zuyun was touched in his heart. Looking at the clothes, he must have been a monk during his lifetime. In the end, he failed to find immortality and died alone here. Mortals work at sunrise and rest at sunset. If they are lucky, they can live for 100 years. When they pass away one day, they can be regarded as having died of old age. The younger generations will also make a lively celebration and burn incense and paper on the anniversary of the death of the emperor. In this comparison, Zuyun couldn't help but feel a little confused. Is it better to cultivate immortals or be immortal? If there are no setbacks and accidents in the life of a mortal, it can also be perfect in the end. But the path of cultivating immortals requires constant struggle. Fight with the sky for life, fight with the earth for resources, and fight with people for immortal fate. If you can't fight, you will eventually become a yellow earth that no one cares about. This senior is lucky that he met me and can help him collect his bones. Thinking about the 3 casual cultivators I killed before, I am afraid that their bodies can only be exposed in the wilderness and become food for wild beasts. After Zuyun figured it out, he sighed slightly. He would definitely fight for immortality, and this day glass mirror was also given by the senior. He said, "Senior, I, Zuyun, got your legacy and got where I am today. I didn't mean to disturb you, I just wanted to find a feng shui treasure for you." After bowing his head and worshipping, Zuyun put away his bones and prepared to put them into Zhang Tianyuan's storage bag. At this time, he had a total of 4 storage bags. One was obtained during the sect competition, and all the daily things were put in this bag. Zhang Tianyuan's storage bag was empty. The other two were taken from the casual cultivators. As for the female cultivator, she was burned into a charred corpse at that time, and the bottleneck in her body was loose, so she didn't search. Just as he put the bones in, a piece of parchment fell out of thin air. Zuyun was stunned. Is this a suicide note? It must have been put in his arms before he died, but it has been so long that his body has completely rotted away, and his clothes will fall apart when touched, right? He picked up the parchment, thinking that if the senior had any unfulfilled wishes, he would help him look at them when he had the chance one day. The parchment had been soaked in tung oil and had not been affected by time, so it was extremely soft to the touch. After flattening it, Zuyun read it word by word, but his brows became more and more tense. Did this senior escape from Yezu more than 500 years ago? It turned out that this parchment was a suicide note, just as Zuyun guessed. It was left by the senior when he knew he was going to die. More than 500 years ago, the battle between the righteous and the evil had come to an end, and the evil was defeated and countless evil sects were destroyed. In order to protect the sacred objects of the clan, this senior fled all the way here in a hurry. But who knew that the people chasing him could always find his location accurately and chase him all the way? But this senior was not a pushover. He kept plotting and eventually used his suicidal magic to kill everyone, while he himself was seriously injured and fell into the barren rock mountain. In order to hide from others and recover from his injuries, he dug a cave here. But his injuries were too severe. Finally, after several years, he knew that he was powerless to recover, so he left a suicide note to inform the destined person. If you get the sacred object of his clan, you need to go to Chuzhu to continue the incense of his sect. Zuyun read about Chuzhu in the book. It borders Yezu. There are monsters and beasts rampant there, and there are many natural cracks in the ground. From time to time, fire will be ejected from the cracks. Those who can survive there are definitely not ordinary people. Zuyun put away the parchment and vaguely guessed that this Deu glass mirror should be the sacred object of the clan mentioned by the senior. But, senior, did you forget to write down, what is the name of your sect? I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 50. After much thought, Zuyun decided to go to Chuzhu to bury the bones again if he had the chance. Zuyun smiled bitterly at the thought of not having a sect's name. Not only that, even the senior's own name was never mentioned in the suicide note. When a mortal dies, he or she has a tombstone, but what about you? After recovering his thoughts, Zuyun opened the other two storage bags. Except for some inferior elixirs, there was only some gold and silver left. Give these to Dad, I won't need much money anyway. Zuyun walked out of the cave, climbed up the cliff as lightly as a swallow, and landed on the cliff-top platform in a few breaths. The cliff of more than 10 feet could not help him at this time. Looking at the familiar mountain path, he chuckled and hurried towards his home. At this time, the clouds and mist in the mountain slowly faded away, and the dewdrops on the branches and leaves also disappeared. Until there were no green plants on both sides of the path, the mountain village where he had lived for 10 years came into his eyes. Go home. Zuyun sighed, hummed a tune, and walked slowly towards a stone house. I haven't seen him for a year, and he's still like this. Opening the door, a familiar figure was wielding an axe to chop wood. In the past, this was all Zuyun's job. Dad, let me do it? Zuyun said with a smile. Zurong paused for a moment, then raised the axe again, splitting a piece of wood as thick as a thigh in half, shaking his head and saying, without my son, I have been hallucinating these single days. Dad, it's not an illusion. Zuyun ducked past, but before Zurong could recover, the axe appeared in Zuyun's hand. Son, is it really you? Zurong was surprised, and the fine lines between the corners of his eyes suddenly stretched. Ha ha ha, I knew that my son would come back. Smiling, a line of clear tears flowed down Zhu Rong's cheeks. Zhu Yun threw the axe aside, threw himself into Zhu Rong's arms and cried, "Dad, my son is back to see you." In the past year, he has killed 7 people, 6 Qi refining stages, plus 1 Wan Lao Zhen in the foundation building stage. But when facing his father, he remembered that he was still a child. "You're worthless. You're an immortal master and you're still crying. Wipe off your horse urine." Zhu Rong didn't realize that he was also crying, but he scolded Zhu Yun. "Dad, like father, like son. My son sees you crying, so he cries with you. Okay, you have become more capable. Do you dare to teach Dad a lesson?" Daddy was chopping firewood and sawdust splashed into his eyes. "Hurry up and sit down, and Dad will cook you a meal." "Dad, I chop wood and you cook." Zhu Yun picked up the axe again and laid out a piece of wood. He didn't use his spiritual power, just like before, he chopped them down one by one. Zhu Yun was busy under the stove on one side of the yard. He looked at Zhu Yun from time to time, with a proud expression on his face, and murmured to himself, "They say that the immortal master is ruthless, but my son Zhu Rong is the one who has the same relationship with me. It's different. Meng Beishi and Zhou Huanghua have never come home to visit. Dad, Big Dog, and 2 dogs are busy practicing, don't talk behind their backs." Even if Zhu Yun doesn't use his spiritual sense, his hearing is still different from what it used to be. Zhu Rong's face was serious and he pretended to be angry. "Okay, how dare you eavesdrop on your father? Believe it or not, I will only give you half a bowl of rice later. Hey, it doesn't matter how much you eat. Even if you taste a bite of the food cooked by your father, your son will be satisfied." The two chatted for a while until the smell of rice came and Zhu Yun also finished chopping the firewood in the entire yard. "Son, why did you come back this time? I have asked many questions over the past year, saying that the immortal sect generally does not allow new disciples to go home. Did you make a mistake and escape home?" Before eating, Zhu Rong stared at Zhu Yun and asked, "Dad, our Lingjian sect is different. After 1 year of joining the sect, you can go home to visit your relatives after you have made some achievements in cultivation. So my son hurriedly came back to see if you secretly found me a stepmother while I was away. Good boy, Dad asked you about business, but you made fun of Dad." Zhu Rong hit Zhu Yun with his chopsticks. Zhu Yun didn't hide, but the chopsticks hit the table with a crisp sound. "Humph, you are an immortal master now. If word spreads that you are beaten by immortal, it will be shameless." "Dad," Zhu Yun took a mouthful of rice and said seriously, "what my son is telling you is business. You are young and strong now, but what will happen in a few more decades?" "What do you mean, you won't come back?" Zhu Rong was not stupid either. Although Zhu Yun didn't say it clearly, he understood it. Zhu Yun took out the stolen gold and silver from his storage bag and piled them on the table. "Dad, find someone who knows how to live well. Keep the money well. It's not that your son won't come back, but he has a lot of things to do, not only cultivation, but also some cause and effect. People are on the path to immortality, and they can't help themselves. From now on, my son will no longer be able to fulfill his filial piety at your knees." Zhu Rong's eyes suddenly turned red. He looked at the gold ingots and silver coins, and then looked at Zhu Yun's serious expression. "Your mother died early, and our father and I depended on each other for life. Originally, Dad expected you to provide for him until he died, but he never thought that you would go on to become a fairy instead. Dad took the money, and it's better not to come back in the future. The longevity of immortals is boundless, as long as you remember that you will always be my son Zhu Rong." Zhu Yun's eyes turned red. This was Zhu Rong's initiative to break off the mortal bond with him. "Dad, don't worry, my son knows." After saying that, he knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Just like chopping firewood, he didn't use spiritual power to protect his body until his head was bleeding. Before leaving, Zuyun also went to the homes of Dago and Ergo. Big Dog's father is a bad drunkard, but he still left a few gold ingots, saying that Big Dog gave them to him. The rotten drunkard immediately got up from the broken bed, grinning and showing his yellow teeth. He said that his son should be filial and asked Zuyun to help the Big Dog bring back more gold. It was a completely different scene at Ergo's house. Ergo's sister pulled Zuyun's sleeve and said, "Brother Zu, why don't I come back? Am I too stupid to be left in the sect to be punished?" Zuyun touched her little head and said, "Ergo is great. With a new fate, the future will be limitless." Ergo's parents thanked Zuyun, saying that their son was stupid and hoped that Zuyun would take good care of him. Zuyun readily agreed and asked them to take care of his father. If something happened, the two families would move around more. It would be best to introduce him to a companion. In the end, Zuyun also left a lot of gold and silver, saying that it was given by Ergo. The couple thanked him profusely and even stayed with Zuyun to eat. Zuyun smiled and said that he had eaten at home, waved his sleeves and turned to leave, without taking away a single cloud. One day and one night, Zuyun returned to the foot of the Lingjian sect mountain. Seeing that it was still early, I wanted to go to Fangxi to have a look. Although he heard from the three casual cultivators how lively the market was, Zuyun Yezhong felt a little uncomfortable without seeing it for himself. Just as he was about to set off, he suddenly felt as if someone was staring at him and couldn't help but turn around. Where he looked was the mountain road leading to Lingjian sect. At this time, there were two figures on the mountain road, a petite girl who looked about 7 or 8 years old. She had climbed more than 10 steps and seemed a little tired and was resting. In front of her, there was a figure in black walking down quickly. But his eyes were looking directly at Zuyun. Chen Hua. Zuyun thought to himself that he had no grudge against Chen Hua. At most, he defeated him in a duel. But the look just now made him aware of it, which showed the resentment in it. "Zuyun, I didn't expect to meet you here." Chen Hua had no expression on his face and walked quickly to Zuyun. He was 14 years old and nearly a head taller than Zuyun. Zuyun asked back, "This is at the foot of the Lingjian sect mountain. What's strange about this?" Chen Huayu choked, "It seemed to be the reason." "Where are you going? See if you are on your way." Zuyun narrowed his eyes and thought to himself, if Chen Hua had any ill intentions towards him and wanted to kill him first, he would naturally stay as far away from the Lingjian sect as possible. After all, he is Elder Mu's apprentice. With people coming and going under the mountain, the news cannot be hidden. "I'm going to Fangxi, how about you?" Zuyun said bluntly. Hearing this, Chen Hua was pleasantly surprised and said, "That's very good. I also want to go to the market to exchange some things. Let's go together." Zuyun frowned slightly in his heart. Seeing that his expression didn't seem to be fake, his acting skills were too good, right? However, this is exactly what you want. Okay. Zuyun nodded, and Chen Hua stepped forward to stand side by side with Zuyun and asked, "Zuyun, do you want to change anything when you go to Fangxi?" "No, I just went to take a look. The people in my valley are very poor." "That's right." Chen Hua didn't hear the self-mockery in Zuyun's words, but said, "I saved some elixirs and planned to practice different sword techniques. I always practice the wood spirit sword technique taught by my master. I feel like I've reached a bottleneck. If there are many pills, you can tell me what you like." Zuyun was stunned, not because of the sword art, but because Chen Hua was so kind. Chen Hua did not pay attention to Zuyun's expression, but continued to ask, "By the way, Zuyun, I remember that you have 5 spiritual roots, right? How high has your chi cultivation been?" Zuyun came to his senses. Was this a test of his background? If I told you about the fourth level of chi refining, would you still dare to fight me?